parece la casa. Entrevista con el profesor Manolín. Viaje interplanetario. ¿Viaje interplanetario? Otro loco. Qué trabajitos me dan. Ni modo. Que tengo el honor de dirigirme al profesor... creo que no.
¿Alguien busca al profesor Manolín, supercadete del éter?
Me mandan a...
¿Mande usted?
Me mandan a...
No oigo nada. ¡Suba!
Oiga, ¿y este es el artefacto?
Estupendo, ¿verdad? Acérquese. El secreto está en el motor rebanátomos.
¿Reba qué?
Rebana átomos. Es muy fácil. Mire, un jalón aquí. Rebanó.
Vaya entrevista. Adiós, profe. Busque mi reportaje mañana.
A ver. En el éter los objetos carecen de peso. ¿Éter? ¡Éter!
¡Profesor! ¡Qué reportaje! ¡Pero qué reportaje!
¿Pero qué hace usted ahí afuera?
Estoy orbitando alrededor de su canoa. ¡Carambolas! ¡Qué reportaje!
¡No se vaya! ¡Yo lo salvo! ¡Ajá!
¡Qué reportaje! ¡Mi máquina! ¡Devuélvamela, idiota!
Cálmese, hombre. Le voy a mandar un lunch. Ahí le va. Cáchelo.
¡Párense! Dos tíos muy vivos, ¿eh? Una infracción por embotellamiento del cielo, otra por chotear la autoridad y una doble por violar las fronteras de un satélite. Patrulla llamando Planeta Rojo.
Aquí cuarto.
Jefe, aquí tengo a dos tipos raros.
¿Y qué? ¿Cumple con el reglamento? Desintégralo.
Un momento. Ningún desintegrarme. Yo soy la prensa.
¿La prensa? ¿Un periodista? Hombre, reintégralo inmediatamente. Escolta a esos caballeros a mi oficina. Son nuestros huéspedes de honor.
¿Reintegrarlo? ¿Cómo?
La prensa extranjera. Hay que hacerlos ver las cosas muy claras. Deben estar cortos.
Se me fugaron, jefe.
Caballeros, es un gran privilegio recibir a un ilustre miembro del Cuarto Poder y a un célebre hombre de ciencia. Verán ustedes que la nuestra es una civilización en que la paz y la prosperidad es la consigna. Hacemos notar, con orgullo, que aquí no tenemos desocupación.
Imagínese 16 horas diarias de trabajo todos los días para todo el mundo y nadie se escapa.
Entre nosotros, la longevidad no es una excepción, sino la regla.
Bueno, sí, no es que vivan más, es que la vida les parece más larga.
Y solo aquí se ha logrado la igualdad entre los hombres.
Sí, señor. Tenemos una igualdad para las masas y una superigualdad para los de arriba.
Acérquese. Nuestra gran capacidad industrial está dedicada al bienestar del pueblo, que practica deportes saludables según el programa del partido. Deportes en los que participan igualmente hombres y mujeres. Bajo la vigilancia constante de nuestro paternal líder máximo, con el noble propósito de crear la paz del mundo.
¡Profe! ¡Fuímonos! ¡Sus! ¡Ahí ellos!
¡Canalla! ¡Ladrón! ¡Sinvergüenza! ¡No me abandonen! ¡No quiero ir a las minas!
Ponte estos y te divertirás en grande.
The space race was even of interest in the propaganda world in Mexico. So Spanish. Yeah, there were some of these done in Spanish. I think that was actually the native tongue of this series. Oh, boy. So PBS is who blocked my stream yesterday. They used footage from the same National Archives thing that I used, and then they claimed it. So I can fight it, but it doesn't bring back the stream, which is really the most important part of why I showed it. Very, very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. But let's pull back. Let's pull back. And let's think about things that don't deal with people at all. These are beyond us. Like, how do magnets work?
This is a small permanent magnet. You can see that it's a magnet because it lifts steel objects. We'll cover the magnet with a thin sheet of paper. This salt shaker is filled with tiny bits of iron called iron filings. Now you know what's going to happen. You've seen this before. Perhaps you've done it yourself. As the iron filings fall onto the paper, they form into a pattern over and around the magnet. But why do the iron filings form in a pattern? It's because each one of these iron filings is being acted on by a force. Each of these little bits of iron is affected by the force of the magnet, even though the magnet isn't actually touching any one of them. A region of space like this, where at every point a force can be felt, is called a field. The space around this magnet is called a magnetic field. If we bring a small compass into the magnetic field, we can see that it too is affected by that field. So although we can't actually see a magnetic field, we can see the effect the field has on objects that are brought into it. Fields are invisible, but they make their presence known in many different ways. For instance, if I stack these little ring magnets on a pencil, the magnetic field around one pushes against the magnetic field of the next, keeping them apart. I can squeeze them together, but the magnetic fields will push them apart again. I can push one magnet up a hill with another magnet without the two magnets touching at all. The magnetic fields around the magnets keep them apart. Well, you can't see the field around a magnet, but you can certainly feel the effects of it. And you can see the effects of that field on iron and steel objects. Now let me show you a different kind of field. This is a steel rod. You've seen how the field around a magnet attracts steel. This is the glass rod, but glass is not affected by the field. It doesn't have any effect on wood. Or, for that matter, this old shoe. Now let me show you something else. This is a plastic rod. Now this rod doesn't affect this shoe either. But watch. Now there seems to be a field around this rod. This rod attracts the shoe without actually touching it. But the field around this rod is not a magnetic field. We've just seen that magnets don't attract shoes. Actually, by rubbing this rod, I've placed an electric charge on it. And around any object with an electric charge is an electric field. The electric field attracts the wood, and the glass, as well as the steel. You can't see the electric field around the charged rod, but you can certainly see the effect it has on different materials. This little box is made of very thin paper, and this is a metal sphere that has been given an electrical charge. Notice how it attracts the paper box when I bring the box near it. Now here's something else I want you to notice. No matter where I move the box around this charged sphere, the box is always attracted so that the string points to the center of the sphere. An electric field seems to extend out from the sphere in all directions. You know, you can't actually see a field, but this drawing does suggest how a field extends out in all directions from the source of the field. What makes the paper box fall when I move it away from the sphere? Well, it looks obvious enough. The electric field pulling on the box gets weaker and weaker, and we say the box falls. But what makes it fall? Have you ever stopped to think that wherever you are on Earth, you are in the midst of a field where at every point a force is felt that is trying to pull things down? That kind of a field is called a gravitational field. I can tell that I'm in a gravitational field right now because if I raise an object up in the air and let it go, a force pulls it back down. That force is called gravity. There is a gravitational field around every object. For example, there's a gravitational field around this pencil. But the gravitational field around a small object is so weak that you don't notice it. However, the Earth is a huge object, and the gravitational field around it is strong enough to be noticed. Everything on Earth, including that city down there, is held down by the Earth's gravitational field. If I jump away from Earth, you know I certainly won't stay up here. The force of gravity will pull me back down to Earth again. Like the other fields we have studied, gravitational fields extend out in all directions from the source of the field. Remember that when we move the paper box in the electric field around this charged sphere, it was always pulled toward the center of the sphere. Well, the same thing happens in a gravitational field. Here is the Earth with its surrounding gravitational field, and here is New York City. If a boy in New York lifts a brick up and lets it go, it will fall to the ground. In other words, it will fall in this direction, toward the center of the Earth. To a boy in New York, that direction is down. Now, what if in Australia something is raised up in the air at the same time and let go? What happens then? Well, it falls toward the center of the Earth, too. The only way people on Earth have of telling which way is down is by feeling which way gravity is pulling. So to someone in Australia, the scene looks like this. To a New Yorker, down means this direction, but to an Australian, down means this direction. Wherever on the Earth we drop something, we say it falls down. But actually, it falls toward the center of the Earth. The gravitational field extends out from the Earth in all directions. The farther away from the Earth you are, the weaker the gravitational field is. But 239,000 miles away from the Earth's gravitational field is still strong enough to hold the Moon in orbit. The unseen force of the Earth's gravitational field holds the Moon in orbit. That force is just as real as the wire holding the metal ball in orbit around this athlete. In science, a field is a region of space in which, at every point, a force can be felt. There are magnetic fields around magnets, there are electric fields around objects that have an electric charge, and there are gravitational fields around all objects. Now, take a look at this. The needle in this compass is magnetic. Normally, it points towards the north. This is an electromagnet. There is a magnetic field around the electromagnet only when electricity is flowing through it. Now I'm going to turn the electromagnet on and off in a particular way. Watch what happens to the magnetic needle. It takes energy to make the needle move back and forth, and that energy seems to be coming from the magnetic field of the electromagnet. Can you think of any other kinds of fields that are used to carry energy from one place to another?
Oh boy, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I just had something with pepper on it. I thank you, Kevin, for the donation via the super thanks button because of my Juggalo's comment. I don't know really any of Insane Clown Posse's material, but I do know about that magnet crack. All right, what do we got? Let's learn about the Nile Valley and its people. One of the things you might notice is that I have several Encyclopedia Britannica films. Well, not several, but I have a couple that I'm showing. I'm trying to balance my coronet. Enjoy.
The rains fall on the red earth of East Africa each year, unfailing and regular. Pools gather into streams. Streams cascade down the mountains. The world's longest river is born. The ancient Nile begins. Since the pharaohs built the pyramids 5,000 years ago, perhaps no river has influenced the course of history for so long as Egypt's river, the Nile. The ancient Egyptians marveled at its unceasing flow and worshipped it as a god. But it was only 100 years ago that the source of the mighty Nile was discovered in Central Africa. From Lake Victoria, the river flows northward over rapids and falls until it encounters the first of a series of dams which provide hydroelectric power and regulate the flow of the river for 40 million people, people whose lives depend upon these waters. From Lake Victoria, the river flows north through Uganda, the Republic of Sudan, and Egypt, finally merging with the waters of the Mediterranean, draining 1/10 of the continent of Africa. What is it like, this 4,000-mile valley of the Nile? The story begins in Uganda, in the jungle and bush, the hills and green fields that make up this rich little country in the heart of Africa, home of the Baganda, Banyoro, and many other tribes who live mostly by raising cotton, coffee, and tea. For most of Uganda's people, life is still primitive. But in schools and universities, more and more are now learning the skills of the modern world, a world which for centuries they knew little of. The city of Kampala is the capital. From modern government buildings, the people of Uganda themselves now administer the affairs of their newly independent nation of 2 million, most of whom are Christians. From Uganda, the Nile continues on northward, entering the Republic of Sudan. The Sudan is about 1/4 of the size of the United States, but with a population of only 10 million people. Geographically, it is divided between the desert of the north and the savanna lands and swamps of the south. The swampland of the southern Sudan is the home of many kinds of African game. Though there are several different tribes in the south who live along the Nile, the Dinka are perhaps the most important. Most Dinka are herdsmen who live by raising cattle. As we determine wealth in dollars, the Dinka measure theirs in cows. Other Dinka live much of their lives in dugout canoes in the swamps by the river. Fishing is their main occupation. The fish are driven down narrow channels and speared. Though most Dinka still live as they have for centuries, great changes are coming also to the southern Sudan. Many Dinka children now attend school for the first time, where they learn to read and write, speak English, and prepare for a less primitive kind of life in the towns. Juba on the Nile is the main town and market center of the southern Sudan. At Juba, the Nile begins to have real importance as a waterway. Stern wheelers provide the principal means of transportation to areas further north. Not many miles from Juba, the stern wheelers encounter a huge area of swamp known as the Sud. For hundreds of square miles, an endless, melancholy sea of papyrus reeds stretches as far as the eye can see. The Sud is probably the largest and most impenetrable swamp in the world. The White Nile, as the river is called here, loses 50% of its water from evaporation beneath the burning tropical sun. When the Nile finally bursts through the Sud, it flows through the parched desert lands of the northern Sudan until it reaches Khartoum, the capital of the Sudan, which lies about halfway between the source of the Nile and the sea. Though Khartoum's people come from a variety of Sudanese tribes, they speak Arabic as their common language and practice the Muslim religion. The Sudanese still remember the days when their country was ruled jointly by Britain and Egypt, when their presidential palace was occupied by a British governor-general. The continued friendship of the Sudan with the Western world has helped give this country security and stability unequaled among other new nations in Africa. Agriculture is the basis of the Sudanese economy, dependent almost completely on the Nile, because in much of the country there is almost no rainfall. Dams spanning the Nile hold back vast quantities of water, and from lakes created by these dams, irrigation canals lead off into a network of waterways stretching across millions of acres of fertile land. Cotton is the main crop. Sudanese cotton, among the finest in the world, is grown mostly on huge government-controlled plantations watered by the White Nile. Near Khartoum, the waters of the White Nile, weak and dissipated now by seepage and evaporation, are replenished by another great river which joins it, the Blue Nile, which, for a few months each year, comes down in a torrent from the mountains of Ethiopia, bringing with it 70% of all the water that flows north into the land of Egypt. 95% of Egypt is arid desert, the only habitable part being a narrow strip of fertile land along the banks of the Nile. It is on this strip, only a few miles wide, that Egypt's 24 million people fight out the daily battle for survival. The fertility of Egypt, a land with almost no rain, depends entirely on water drawn from the Nile by a variety of means. Farming is also the basis of Egypt's economy. As in the Sudan, cotton is the most important crop. Sugar is also grown. There are orchards of figs, grapes, peaches, and other fruits. Many farmers keep pigeons, both to eat and as a source of fertilizer. Kafrasita is typical of many Egyptian villages. Women and girls are seldom seen outside the house. Farm work is left entirely to the men and boys. A clover-like crop called bersim is grown for fodder. As there is little land for grazing along this narrow, densely populated strip, domestic animals are kept tethered near the house and their feed brought to them. Since ancient times, the task of raising water to irrigate their fields has preoccupied Egyptians, and today, irrigation is still the key to life. Dams like those in Uganda and the Sudan restrain the Nile from rushing to waste in the Mediterranean. In southern Egypt, work progresses on a vast new dam that will ultimately dwarf all others on the Nile, the Aswan High Dam. Built by Russian engineers and machinery and costing $1,200 million. The high dam will bring under cultivation 2 million acres of now useless land and provide new farms for 5 million peasants. Power from the high dam will meet the increasing demand for electricity among Egypt's expanding industries. Blast furnaces work night and day, pouring forth tons of molten steel, which symbolize Egypt's industrial revolution. Typical industries include chemical factories producing fertilizers for Egyptian farms, textile mills annually turn out miles of cloth from homegrown cotton. Most industry is centered around Cairo on the Nile. Cairo, the largest city in Africa, the capital of Egypt, the undisputed heart of the Arab world. Long a British protectorate, Egypt gradually gained full independence. And today, people are preoccupied with the use of this new independence, the rising power of the Arab nations of Africa and the Middle East, the nationalist revolution sweeping Egypt. Beyond Cairo, the Nile fans out into a series of channels leading to the sea. This is the delta of the Nile, an extremely fertile region which feeds over half of all the people of Egypt. At last, the long journey to the sea is nearly over, as the river empties into the Mediterranean. 5,000 years ago, one of the first civilizations on Earth grew up along the banks of the Nile in Egypt. And for 5,000 years, the people of the Nile Valley have depended on this river for their very lives. Today, the river known to the pharaohs as the Lord of all rivers remains as it has for 50 centuries, the master of their destinies.
All right, so what do we have so far? We have clientele, Apuchis, Segas, Tucson, Cleopatra, Gemini, of course, Herculean, so instead of Herculean, okay, alumni, protein, and then textile. So there you go. Learn how to pronounce something new every day. Okay. What's interesting is that in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there were a lot of films, certainly made by educational film companies, but there were ones that were made for general audiences. And they covered the geography of the United States and talked about specific areas and places and states. And almost all of them were by oil companies. It's very strange. I'm not sure. I mean, it could be that some of these sold gasoline, and so this was like a travel log type of thing to get people enthusiastic about traveling. I'm not sure what it was, but here is one of these films, Beyond the Valley. It's not Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It's not Beyond the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, but maybe Russ Meyer saw this. Enjoy.
My name is Luis. I am 28 years old. I am a Puerto Rican. I'd like to tell you something about myself and about Puerto Rico. This is our home. And here is our oldest one, Jose. He is a bundle of energy with an appetite like a lion. But I have to tell him to be back from play in time for lunch. And there is Maria, my wife. Every Saturday, Maria makes me an omelette for lunch with peppers. She is a wonderful cook. And finally, Pablito. We think he's a cute little fellow. This is our family and our home. We live comfortably with many things. You know, we are able to buy Pablito fresh milk every day. I often think when I look at the children, how things have changed in Puerto Rico. Yes, there are so many new things. Maria has a modern stove. We have a television set, running water. Yet, children can only take these things for granted. For they know only the world of the present. They have no knowledge of the past, and so have seen no change. Their world is a world in which there has always been television and running water. So it is with every child. And so it was with me when I was a boy, when my world was a world without a past. Yes, I remember. I remember the valley where I was born. I remember the sugar mill, the fields of sugar cane, almost ready for harvest. Ever since I can remember, the valley had a special meaning for our family. Everything we needed, our house, our food, our clothing depended on the valley. The valley was our life. There is my father's house, and there is Juan, my sister's husband. Like so many men in the valley, Juan can find no regular work. Between jobs, he works in my father's vegetable garden and tries inventing things to make the garden produce more food for his family. His ideas aren't always successful, but Juan keeps trying. Someday, perhaps, he'll find a good, steady job. There is my father, and there is the house where we were born. And there is my sister Carmen, Juan's wife, busy with her daily chores. My father is a cane cutter, as he was when I was a boy. And when Carmen and I were kids, like Carmen's children today, we too played our simple childhood games. Even then, a tin can was a wonderful thing. And my mother spent her time caring for us as she helps care for little Mercedes today. Yes. Today, life goes on in our valley pretty much the same as it did in those days. As I grew older, I began to think of the valley in a different way. The valley hadn't changed. The sugar cane, as always, came to ripe maturity early in the year. The samples taken for analysis would yield the knowledge nature knew full well that once again her time was near. And the sugar mills, as if to answer nature, gave the signal that they too would soon be ready. The giant machines that would process the cane began to wake from their annual sleep. And the people of our valley waited for the call that meant the end of the long months of waiting. For with the harvest once again, there would be pork and bread, and even perhaps pasteles on our tables. This was the eternal cycle of the valley, the path our fathers had taken unresisting through the years. But I was of a new generation with its right to feel and think anew. And I began to feel that we depended too much on the valley. Already my world had gone beyond our hills, for I had learned that our valley was not the only soil. Sugarcane was not the only crop. From as far west as Maricao to the hills of Comerío, up from Peñuelas, down from Utuado, there was coffee in the mountains in the west. Here to other fathers and their families, the ripening coffee berry was the bright sign that meant the end of waiting for the private needs, of roofing for the house, or a kettle for the stove. And from Naranjito in the north, down the winding road to Cuamo in the south, from the valley of La Plata all the way to Caguas, there was tobacco in the mountains in the east. And here, to other fathers and other sons, the ripening tobacco was their own sign that promised grant of simple wants of clothing, canned goods, or a catcher's mitt. To all these people, to all of us who lived on the land, and by the land, and for the land, to the million who fashioned from the rude earth our very existence, the soil was our heritage, the harvest our common wealth. And harvest time had come. Suddenly the valley was alive. Men cutting, loading, hauling sugarcane. How clearly I remember it. Machetes swinging, cutting. Fat cane bursting with juice. Men and machetes in the cane fields, on hot dry days, raising the dust of the leaves. Dust that clings to sweating faces. Dust that rises and settles once again on the face of the earth. These things in our valley repeated in valleys all over the land. For in Puerto Rico, sugar is king. Coffee pickers work on many a mountain slope, picking berries to be husked and dried and roasted. Coffee feeds and clothes 100,000 people, but sugar is king. Tobacco covers many a gentle hillside. Bright green leaves to be hung and dried and cured. Tobacco feeds and clothes another 100,000, but sugar is king to 1,000,000.
La caña, bendito fruto, en mi tierra borincana es la reina soberana de toditos los productos. El jíbaro noble y culto que la sabe cultivar se levanta a trabajar de mañana muy contento para buscarse el sustento de sus hijos y su hogar. Esa fruta que se ve tan linda y coloradita, esa es la más exquisita que pueda probar usted. Se trata del buen café de esta tierra tropical. Usted lo pone a secar, luego lo tuesta y lo muele, y lo sabroso que huele cuando usted lo va a tomar. Esa hoja tan verdecita que el campesino cultiva es otra industria nativa de esta tropical isleta. Es el tabaco que invita a todo buen fumador por su aroma y su sabor. Lo proclama el mundo entero, un producto verdadero de calidad superior.
But soon the harvest was over. Nature had added another year. Once again, her benediction had come and gone. Suddenly, there was no more cane to cut, no more cane to load, no more cane to grind. For the people of our valley, there was no more work. For the people in the mountains, there was no more coffee to pick, no more berries to wash, no more tobacco to cut, no more leaves to sew and hang and dry and sell. Why was there not enough work for all? What were the reasons? Was it because of too many people pressing on the land? Was it foreign competition or quotas or hurricanes? Or was it because too many depended too much on agriculture? We did not know and had no time for theories. We only knew we had a love for the land and a faith in the land, and would stay with the land through all disaster. But we knew too that each year, after the harvest was gone and the work was over, that our privation was very real, and that our questions had no answers. As the years went by, I began to understand why the valley was not enough to supply our needs. Take a land of mountains that offers poor soils and limited land resources. Add 2 million people with a rate of increase of 35,000 a year. Give each man, woman, and child 1/2 acre of arable soil, and tell them they must live primarily by the products of their scrap of soil. What is the result? A land with a per capita income of $122 a year. A land forced to import 40% of its food. A land whose very poor had been pushed to a swamp. A river's edge, their last frontier. That was Puerto Rico in 1940. What was the answer? Simply this. We had to keep our people working all year round. Agriculture alone could not do it. We needed industry. In the valleys and the cities and the towns, we needed hundreds of factories, factories all over Puerto Rico that would put many thousands to work. Factories that knew no season. Factories that would give us income the year round. But Puerto Rico could not do these all alone. We needed help. The help of outside capital, companies with foreign markets for our goods. If only we could persuade private enterprise to build new factories in Puerto Rico. What attractions did we have? Our island has an ideal climate, semi-tropical, tempered by the trade winds, and a temperature close to 75 degrees, winter and summer. Our ports are within easy shipping distances of United States and Latin American markets, 1,600 miles to New York, 1,700 miles to New Orleans, 550 miles to Caracas. There are no trade barriers between Puerto Rico and the United States, no visas or passports, a free exchange of goods, people, and a common currency, for we in Puerto Rico are United States citizens too. And here is a labor reservoir of thousands, eager to learn, looking for work. These were great attractions. But in addition, our government could offer private enterprise something special. A powerful incentive to build new factories. They could offer qualified private investors long-term freedom from corporate income, property, and municipal taxes. Freedom from taxes. Here, we hoped, would be the keystone of our success. The work had begun. To help new industries, the Economic Development Administration, or Fomento, was created. In addition to offering tax incentive, Fomento helped investors select the best manufacturing sites, evaluate industrial prospects, and secure economic data. For many factories, There were advantages in locating near one of the three principal cities: San Juan, the capital; Ponce, the second largest city; and Mayagüez on the west coast. For other factories, there were incentives for locating inland in rural areas. Industry was new to Puerto Rico, and many problems arose, but we had begun. Slowly at first, the plans for the factories, the people who would build them, began to merge. If a cane cutter could find no work for his machete, he was given a saw. If a coffee picker's work was over for another season, he turned to a hammer. If a tobacco worker had no more crop to harvest, he found a shovel ready. Factories needed people to run them, power to operate the machines, roads and ships to carry raw materials and finished products. So we built vocational schools to train draftsmen, woodworkers and electricians. Train men to work on the machines of our industries, the bridges and the factories. Better roads for the people, for industry. Roads to carry men, machines and materials. Men and machines and materials to work on stores, offices, and the homes for the factory workers. Better ports for industry, ports for the ships to bring in the raw materials, ships to carry out the finished products of our industries. New dams for industry, giant reservoirs to catch the water from the skies, water from the mountaintops, and water to work for power, power for the machines, power for the people, power to make the factories work. From San Juan to Ponce, from Aguadilla to Guayama, from Mayagüez to Macao, side by side with King Sugar, total 1950, 98 factories, aluminum parts, rivets, and washers. Skillful hands that had picked the coffee had learned to use a gauge. Total 1951, 132 factories. Women's clothing and accessories. Nimble hands that had sewn tobacco leaves now ran a seam on cloth. Total 1952, 188 factories. Shoes, gloves, bathing suits, and hats. Strong hands that had swung a machete were getting the feel of a machine. Total 1953, 262 factories. Fountain pens and automatic pencils. The right workers for a job selected by modern aptitude tests. Total 1954, 294 factories. Radios, television sets, and electronic equipment. Women home trained in fine needlecraft showed high aptitude in small, precise work. Total 1955, 350 factories. Hosiery, sweaters, and men's shirts. Thousands had graduated from government schools trained in special tasks. Total 1956, 452 factories. Plastics for bottle caps, toys, and electrical parts. On assembly lines, workers were setting many production records. Total 1957, 542 factories. Nails, wire, and wire mesh. Private enterprise had imported machines by the thousands. Total 1958, over 600 factories. China, pottery, and glassware. And they had helped create work for tens of thousands. New factories in Puerto Rico. New factories in the cities, in San Juan, Ponce, and Mayagüez. New factories in the towns and in the valleys, from the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There is no factory yet in our valley. Perhaps someday there will be. There are still the old familiar scenes of my childhood. There the sugar mill, and here the young cane beginning its new growth. The eternal cycle of the valley repeating once again. But today I am no longer a child, and today I would say to my father, my world has grown. I will always remember my valley, but it is my world no longer. For our generation has looked past the hills. We have gone beyond the valleys to make progress and change. So it has been with my generation, and so it must be with our children. And that is why they must grow strong in mind and body and spirit, for theirs will be the new mind and body and spirit of Puerto Rico.
Good catch with the count. He didn't sound like one assembly line. Oh, beautiful footage, man. I've been looking at a lot of assembly line footage because I am working on a project, the assembly line sleep machine project, that's going to actually go on a new streaming service that I'm going to be working with called Eternal Family. And they have a lot of horror movies, independent movies, and lots of great foreign stuff. Holy cow, they have a lot of great foreign stuff. Anyways, they're based in Canada, and they want to host a couple of these kind of ambient, chill things. And so there'll be one that's going to be assembly line footage. There's going to be one that's going to be home movies. Then there's going to be one that's going to be microscopic footage of sperm. Also, I'm pitching these ideas, if I can find enough footage, the footage of slow motion car crashes, and like all that test footage, and also, what was the other thing? EVAs, extravehicular activities, which is spacewalks, if I have enough footage. So anyways, so in looking at this film, I was like, oh my gosh, oh, that footage, oh, making the coffee, oh, that's so great. So I get very excited when I see stuff like that. Thanks for tuning in today, and thank you, Jeremy and Kevin, for contributing to the cause, and that cause is basically paying rent at 7 storage units, which I have been going to a lot recently, looking for stuff for this Eternal Family project. Besides that, we're also going to have themed shows and individual films, and they will be all in HD, so they'll be purdy, and so we have to rescan some stuff. Anyways, thank you for watching, and we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so have a good day, and we will see you soon. You can also support us via the ko-fi.com/abgeeks, patreon.com/abgeeks, or just watch other videos that we've put on YouTube. That brings in some pennies every time you watch. So thanks again. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.